What's up, everybody? I do a lot of regular work as a professional audio engineer. I specialize in mixing and mastering for loud genres like bass-heavy electronic music, pop, and hip-hop. Because of my work, I'm always keeping an eye on new software that companies are launching and really keeping tabs on companies that are doing something innovative or pushing the envelope in some way. So a little while back, I contacted Sonible. They'd come really highly recommended by some of my colleagues in the industry, and I was interested in what they were doing integrating AI into their audio software. That ended up resulting in a relationship where I'm now helping them to cover the release of a couple of their new audio plugins. A couple caveats before we get going. One is this is a sponsored video. Sponsored videos are one of the ways that I keep the lights on around here, and I'm able to continue generating content for you guys for free. So thank you to Sonible for hopping on board as our sponsor for this video. Second, they've provided me with beta pre-release copies of this software. So what you're going to be seeing are betas, and you never know, there might be a little tweak or two in the final release version. So just keep that in mind as we move forwards. The two plugins are True Level and True Balance. They're both metering plugins, and together they're sold as a metering bundle from Sonible. If you just can't wait to check them out right now, there's links below in the video description. But what I'm gonna do is take you guys on a journey and show you how I use them in my workflow as an audio engineer. We're gonna take a real world scenario. I'm gonna open up a mastering session, and I'm gonna show you how I use each of these plugins to be able to get my loudness and levels correct. That's what True Levels does. And I'm gonna show you how I get my spectral balance correct and be able to make better informed decisions by using True Balance and comparing my track spectrum or my client's track spectrum to that of genres and of reference tracks. Because this is going to be a more detailed deep dive video, I've put timeline tags down below if you want to skip to something specific, or if you just want to make your learning experience more random and glitchy for no real reason. But yeah, I recommend you join me from the beginning and we go all the way through together. So buckle up, grab yourself a tea or a coffee, glass of champagne, whatever floats your boat, and let's get to work. For our session today, I'm going to be using headphones because I'm away from my studio on the road. Pretty much the only headphones that I trust for this type of work are Audeze LCD5 planar magnetic headphones. These headphones require no correction at all. They are extremely flat. They don't flatter the music anyway, so I feel like I'm getting very true sound, which is important for engineering, and they have incredible bass extension. So let's pop these on and we'll take a look at our session. So what we have is up top, we have a existing master of this song. This is a song by Dusko called Bassline Funky. And then we have the pre-master. And what I'm going to be doing is remastering it because the existing master is not in conformance with the loudness standards that you would expect to have for music in this genre. It's mastered too quietly currently. And in order to shop this to labels and have this appeal to the DJs who are the audience for this music, it needs to be louder. So a quick note on loudness, because I know a lot of you will have been taught and told on YouTube and by other engineers that you need to master to the streaming standards of -13, -14 LUFS, and that the loudness wars are over. And that's just not the case. In many cases, if I could, I would make two masters. I would make a master that's optimized for streaming sites, and I would go to those loudness standards like -13, -14 LUFS. But that's a luxury that oftentimes we don't have. Oftentimes I only have the ability to submit one master, and you have to take into account who is the audience for this music. The audience, primary audience for this music is DJs. So this song is going to appear on sites like Beatport where there is no loudness normalization whatsoever. And it's going to be listened to back against other songs that are much louder than this by top artists. This song is also going to be shopped to record labels that will be listening to and evaluating whether they want to sign this song against other mastered songs that are competitively loud in alignment with where the genre sits. So you have to take those things into consideration when you're doing a master. And in this case, I'm engineering this master for the primary audience, for getting it signed to a label, bass music label, and getting it played by DJs. So we are going to be mastering loud today. Let's take a look and currently see where the existing master is at. You'll see here I've looped up a section of the song, and I always start by working on my master with the loudest part of the song. So in this case, this is the second drop. This is where the song is the busiest and the most amount of instrumentation is in. And let's go ahead and add an instance of true level. So we'll add true level, and then we will also add in true balance. And you'll see that I have the defaults up, and it says Spotify. So what I'm actually going to do eventually is change this, because you can choose from all of these different targets, which is cool if you need to master for one of these sites. And then the next thing is you get to choose from profiles that are done for different genres and types of audio. So you can see here, this is actually one of the neatest things about this plugin, is they have not just one thing called EDM like a lot of plugins do. They actually have differentiated into different subgenres of electronic music. And in this case, we can choose electronic bass music. And that's what this song is. So let's go ahead and fire this off and see where the current master sits. So it's running an integrated LUFS calculation. You can see down here in the bottom left corner, you can switch to short-term or momentary, and you can pause or clear. This is useful. So I'm going to use, in this case, integrated. I'm going to clear it, and you'll watch this update live. Great. So it's showing you integrated loudness. It's showing you these green ranges here, which are the ranges of the references that Sonible has analyzed for this genre. Okay, so this is the electronic bass music genre. You can see the next one is dynamic range, and then you can see loudness units range. And then you can see true peak over here. Now, if one of these parameters is sitting within the range, it goes green. And then if one of them is sitting way outside the range, it goes red. And that's just a visual indicator to you to keep an eye on these things. So yeah, we can see right now it's sitting at about -9 LUFS. And let's take a look at what the actual genre is. So now we can move away from using this as a reference level, and I can manually load in reference tracks. That's what this area is over here. So you can choose your own references, and I like to do that. So you just click the plus sign, and then it gives you a window where you can go. I have a shortcut to my folder here called References, and I have a few of the genres that I work in a lot. This one we're going to do in the neuro bass. And you'll see I have a variety of different songs by different artists that are some of the top artists in the genre that I think are the best engineered songs in the entire genre. Now, if you add in the entire song, let's just do that with, let's take an example of this one, Tommy's Theme by Noisia. That's going to load in. It's going to take a moment to analyze it. And then once it's loaded in, we'll be able to see where it's sitting in the range. And in order to switch from this as the loudness reference item to the reference that we've manually loaded in, you just click that. You can see everything updates. Okay. So, and then you can see little crosshairs where the color matches the reference track, and you can click to disable it and enable it. Okay. So the one thing I want to say is that this is running an integrated LUFS calculation on the reference track for the entire span of the entire song. And I don't actually use that when I'm mastering, because you have things like breakdowns and intros and outros that can pretty heavily skew an integrated LUFS calculation. Like if you take the same song and you double the length of the intro, which is a quieter section, it'll change the integrated LUFS value so it appears quieter, even if the volume or loudness of the drop has remained the same. So let's go ahead and just, I'm going to delete that reference, and you'll see I have another folder in here under my references, Neurobase, called Just Drops. And Just Drops, as you can imagine, what I've done is I've actually rendered out just the heavy drop section of all of my key references. So I'm going to add in the just drops. And the neat thing you can do here is you can actually multi-select these, and you can open them, and it will analyze and load all of them in together. All right, so now you can see we've got the 4 references. These are all the just drops, and you can activate or deactivate each one of them by clicking on them. And then you can see where they all line up for the reference tracks. And you can see that the average of the reference tracks in their drops is negative 5.9 LUFS. So that's the purpose of using these. I want to be able to use that as a target because this is where the genre is sitting for these types of music. So let's go ahead and take a look at the pre-master, and we'll fire that off, and let's check out to see where it's sitting. Now, you'll notice that the integrated LUFS calculation is beginning to update, but what I do here is I clear. So we go from a fresh start because this is a pre-master, not a master. So as you can imagine from a pre-master, it is way quieter. Let's go ahead and begin my process of mastering. The first thing I'm going to do is start off with an EQ. So FabFilter Pro-Q3 is my go-to EQ. And when I'm working on it in mastering, I always put it into linear phase mode. And I start by removing the inaudible lows, so we can start here by 20 Hertz, and we may adjust that, but that's a good place to start. And then I'm also going to remove the extreme inaudible highs. There we go. And then the very next thing I'll do is I will put in a saturation device. So my preferred saturator for mastering is the Black Box Analog Design HD2MS. This is a very, very good saturator that has features in it that I like for mastering. In particular, it has mid-side mode. So I'm going to engage mid-side mode rather than having it be left and right. And you can see that it updates here from L and R to M and S. And then if I change parameters, you can see that they are linked. I actually don't want that behavior. I want to be able to adjust the mids and the sides differently. So I'm going to disengage parameter link. Okay, so let's go ahead and just throw that in. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to gain up into this unit. So I'm going to increase the amount of gain by 3 dB going into the saturator, and I'm going to gain stage down its output by the exact same amount. I want to get a bit more drive going into the saturation modules. And with this, we have to press in, out to be able to engage the saturation stage. So we're going to do that. Now that we have that set up, I'm going to take a look at what's happening down in the bottom end of the song. And this is where true balance will come in. So this is our first look at true balance. A quick scan through true balance. You have our same spectral reference items here. So we can go through and we can select electronic. And we get to see in the gray area, we can see what the range of spectral balance is for songs that are in their electronic reference group. And we have the ability to add in reference tracks again. So we're going to do that. We're going to go click the plus. We're going to go to my same neural bass folder. We're going to go to the just drops, and we're going to select all the drops of my bass music reference tracks. So it's going to analyze those. And then you see an individual line for each one of them. And you also see the gray range of where they're all sitting in terms of spectral balance. So that's what I do to set it up. And we're going to make sure that it's clicked to the reference tracks as its target instead of the electronic one that's in its profiles. So we're going to click on my reference tracks. And down below, we have correlation. So we have what we can see width, and we have correlation, meaning how much the left and the right or correlates with each other. And this gives us an idea of if we have any issues with lack of correlation in the low end that might cause phase cancellation. And then we also have adjustable bands. We can move these bands around. We have the band that's set by default at 200 Hertz. And then we have a band that is set for the highs at 2K. I'm just gonna leave those as default for now. And let's take a look at the correlation on the low end. So it's looking really good. But one of the things that I will usually do in mastering is put a sides filter in to eliminate any sides information in the very bottom end of the song. So I'm gonna go ahead and just double click to add a node. And I'm gonna change this node to just sides. And then I'll select a low cut filter type and adjust that. Let's go 90 Hertz. And that will strip out the sides information in the very bottom end of the song and can help with correlation in the subs of your master. Excellent. Great. So the next plugin I'm going to put in is I'm going to put in a Pro-MB from FabFilter. I'm going to throw that after. And what I want to do here is maybe a bit of a non-standard use of this plugin. I'm going to put in a band. I'm going to adjust this band to a cutoff frequency of 300 Hertz. I'll throw oversampling on. I'll change it into linear phase. And I'm going to leave look ahead on. Okay, so this is what it's doing by default. It's going to compress this band. That's not what I want. So what I'm going to do is actually take the range up and make it positive. So I'm just going to go, say 1.5 dB here. I'm going to take the attack right down. I want the attack to be very fast. The release to be pretty quick as well. And what I'm going to do is set this up so that every time a kick drum comes in, it does nothing. And between the kick drums, I want everything in this band to swell up to give the song a little bit of movement. So the way I do that is by opening up the expert area and taking it from band, which is what the trigger of the compressor is reading, from within the band to free. So rather than triggering on the audio material in the band, I can take these and adjust these and move this down into the range where the kick drum is. So to target the kick drum, I'm going to press audition. So I just hear what's within this trigger band, and I'm going to adjust it until I hear the main attack of the kick. Okay, great. So now we're triggering off the kick, and this is going to do something very different now if we have a listen. Awesome. So this is a technique that I use sometimes, not all the time, if I want to impart a bit of a sense of movement. So in this case, it's working. I'm going to leave it as is, and we'll move on. Next thing I'm going to do is add a clipping stage. I oftentimes, on the very loudest masters, will add a clipper in before the compressor, if I'm using a mastering compressor, and before the mastering limiter to clean up little variations in the signal so that the limiter and mastering compressor are doing less work. I prefer to spread the gain reduction load out over multiple plugins rather than have a single plugin like a single limiter be doing a lot of work. If you have a single limiter on your master and it's doing like 5 or 6 dB of gain reduction, then it's introducing a lot of nasty sounding intermodulation distortion to your master. And it's reducing unnecessarily your audio fidelity. So if you instead use a clipping stage or a compression stage or multiple limiting stages to be able to clean things up before the final mastering limiter, it in general sounds better. So let's take a look at how I'm going to do that. Some limiters have a built-in clipping stage, but a lot of times I don't like the way it operates. So in this case, I'm going to use a separate clipper. I'm going to use a clipper by Kazrog called K-Clip. And this clipper is quite unique in that it has 2 clipping stages. It has a ceiling. You might think you just pulled a ceiling down. Don't do that, because that is a non-oversampled clipping stage, and it's going to sound worse than if you use an oversampled clipping stage. Oversampled clipping will be cleaner. So this is the stage where you have oversampling available. And here's the first really amazing feature that I like about this plugin. You can link the parameters so that as you push up the input, the output gain stage is down. So you're able to make a much more educated decision, because it's not just making everything louder, right? Loudness very easily fools your ears. The next thing you can do is you can enable oversampling. I have it defaulted here to 4 times oversampling, but you can go up to 32 times if you're doing, when you're ready to render your final, right? So I'll jack that up to maximum typically before I render my final. So then down here in the bottom right, you get to see the amount of clipping that has actually happened, and you get to see it in red on the waveform. So let's just go ahead and adjust some clipping. Okay, so we're able to get 5.1 dB of clipping, and it sounds very clean. Now, if this was a much more smooth and exposed track like jazz or like deep house or hip hop, even, where you have a really smooth 808 sub underneath, we probably wouldn't be able to get away with that. You'd hear some crunchiness. But because of the genre and how much saturation and distortion and high end there already is in this track, we're able to push the clipper pretty hard here. So keep that in mind. You really need to listen for the amount of distortion that this is introducing. And that leads us to yet another feature of this plugin that I really like. You can solo out the wet signal. In this case, you can solo what they call the delta signal, what the clipper is introducing in terms of distortion. So I'm going to flip that on and off so you can hear it. So you're hearing those little clicks and pops, just the little tiny crunches. That is the distortion that the clipper is introducing by hard clipping it. Okay, that's about where I'm going to leave the clipper for now. We've been able to take off some of these little momentary peaks and clean things up before the final phases of gain reduction. So I don't always use a mastering compressor, but in this case, I am. I'm going to use FabFilter Pro-C2. And you might think, oh, let's put it into the algorithm mastering. I'm actually not going to do that, because I find that makes the compressor a little more sluggish than I want here. And the purpose of the compressor, what I want this compressor to be doing, is introducing a little bit of crest factor from the kick drums right as they hit, so that we have a little bit of crest factor going into the final limiter. So let's go ahead and set this up. I don't want much of a knee here. I'll go 3 dB. We want to back off the attack, because what I want is for the punch, the full weight of the kick drum and snare drums to come through. So I'm going to let 30 milliseconds of that bleed through before the compressor kicks in. And let's go ahead and make some other adjustments. I'm going to use a 2-to-1 ratio. We don't need heavier than that. This is mastering. And let's go ahead and begin to tickle the compressor a little bit. Now the compressor is reacting to some of the sub in the bass. So let's go ahead and tweak that. Oversampling, I'm going to put that on. We're going to click here to open the side chain. And in order to have this react more to the kick and less to the sub, I'm going to engage the high pass here. Let's go ahead and audition, and I'll engage the low pass as well and begin to band pass things in. So let's audition so we just hear the signal that's triggering the compressor. There we go. So we have a tighter selection on the kick, and you can see the compressor now is reacting primarily to the kick drum. It's springing back up a little quick for me. I'm going to back off the release a touch. So I don't want much compression here. I just want about a dB, and that's dialed in nicely. Now we can move to get the loudness up to where we want it. So I'm going to add in a mastering limiter, and then we're going to come back and we're going to make some tweaks. Now you notice that I haven't been looking at true level this entire time. I'm just making quick changes because I need to get the loudness up so that it's close to in range with our references, and we need the mastering limiter to be doing the heavy lifting on that. So let's go ahead and go to my mastering collection here. And the limiter that I like using the most is by DMG on stuff like this. And it's called Limitless. And I'm going to add Limitless in. Let's go ahead and enlarge the interface a little bit so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to start by changing the algorithm to aggressive. That suits this genre. And then I'm going to add in a very, very small ceiling, 0.1. And I want to make a comment on ceiling. Some people, when they're doing masters, have been told that you need a ceiling of 1 dB or 1.5 dB. And that, again, comes from the recommendations of sites like Spotify and Apple Music, where they're trying to make sure that there aren't true peaks that are in excess of 0. But on a master like this, if you leave a dB or a dB and a half of margin or ceiling on your track, it's going to sound wildly quieter than other songs in the genre. I'm going to just quickly here load up a project where I can show you. So I have a reference track analysis here, and these are the references that I've used. And let's take a look at these songs. And it's very useful looking at the waveforms, in particular in assessing your ceiling or margin. So you can see here's the Joe Ford track, here's Koan Sound, Eastern Thug. They have a tiny margin. We have Mako, this is my funky song. We have Supersonic, My Existence by Skrillex, and we have Tommy's Theme by Noisia. Now you'll notice there's conformance in all of these masters. They are all right up to 0 dB or very, very close, right? This Eastern Thug one, let's take a look. You know, it's like, that's like 0.1, 0.2 dB margin there, right? That's a tiny margin. But then we have this one. Okay, this is a remix, and it's the one that stands out because they've left this margin. And if we take a look at the margin here, that's like a 1 dB, 1.3 dB margin. And if you play that song back to back in a DJ set or just flipping through them on Beatport between this song and one of these other songs, massive difference. It's going to fool everyone's ears into thinking that it's not as good because we perceive things that are just a little bit louder, even a dB louder, as better. So that's the justification I use for pushing the margin up to a competitive level with everything else. Coming back to our mastering session, let's pop open Limitless. So we've got our ceiling set at -0.1, and now we will adjust our threshold. And I'm going to do this with true level up next to the limiter. We're going to clear everything, and let's take a listen. Now, I have this running on integrated LUFS right now, and that's not useful for me when I'm adjusting the limiter threshold because it's going to be changing the level of loudness quite dramatically. And if it's integrated LUFS, it's just going to keep averaging it. So what I usually do at this point is flip from integrated LUFS to short term so I can see it averaged over a much shorter window. Okay, now we're close. We can see the loudness of our song playing through true level is appearing, and here's all of our reference targets. So let's go ahead and switch back to integrated LUFS now and clear. Awesome. So now that I've played this in and we are in the range of the reference tracks, and what I mean by in the range, you can see this has gone green, this has gone green, and you can see that we are in the dynamic range of the reference track group, and we're in terms of loudness within the reference track group. Okay? Now we are seeing that the true peak level is red at plus 1.6 TP. I ignore that completely. And I want to have a quick discussion about true peak and what they call ISPs or intersample peaks and TPL, which is true peak limiting. And in this genre, when the audience is for DJ play, I completely ignore ISPs and I completely ignore true peak meter readings. I just go with peak level and I don't consider intersample peaks at all. The argument for intersample peaks is a deep one that I am not going to get into, but basically you can't hear them in this music. Intersample peaks theoretically can cause some momentary tiny little bits of distortion on some music played through very old or extremely bad digital to analog converters. That is not the case for this audience. This audience is going to be playing through good digital to analog converters. And even if you could hear a tiny little bit of distortion, it's completely masked by the amount of distortion that's already in the song and the amount of distortion that is being introduced by the clipping stage and the limiting stage. So I'm completely ignoring intersample peaks. As you can see, the reference tracks do as well. You could see that those reference tracks are done right up near to 0 dB and they're very, very loud. Of course, they're going to have some theoretical intersample peaks, but nobody's going to be able to hear the intersample clips that may or may not be occurring because of the way that the genre sounds, right? Okay, so enough said about that. One of the neat things about True Level is once you get all this information in here, you can click this button called Level Check. And it's going to give you little tips at the bottom. It's telling us loudness looks good, dynamics look good, and it says peak level seems too high. Now I'm just going to ignore that last one for the purposes of the conversation we just had. Great. So we're looking good there. And this is giving me very, very useful information. So now let's take a look at true balance. True balance, once we're up into this level of loudness range, we're very close to the references. Now I want to see how the spectral aspects of the song are looking and if it needs any EQ or any adjustments in the broader scheme of things on the master. So let's go ahead now and we are going to make sure we're targeting our reference tracks group using true balance. And we can go ahead and play and take a look at where our track is now sitting in terms of the references. So what we were seeing when it was playing was in the background, we were seeing a live spectrum that was dancing around, right? And you can see you can control the speed and resolution of things down here. And that controls the entire interface. And then we're seeing an averaged line, which is this bright solid green line. And that's the averaged spectrum of our song playing through true balance. And then, as we said before, there's this gray range, which is the range of all of the references together. And then we have individual references that correspond to the color of the reference tracks here. And you can, if you want to exclude certain references, once you load them in, you can just deactivate them. So let's say you want to focus in on one particular reference song and get it as close as you can to that. Let's say, in this case, it's Noisia, Tommy's theme. We can disable everything and just click to enable that and see where ours sits, okay? In this case, I'm gonna just leave all of the references engaged, and I'm gonna be looking at an average of them. So let's go ahead and just play that again. Awesome. So you can see at the bottom, our correlation was looking really good. Our correlation in the bottom band was all the way up close to +1. And then we saw a positive correlation from the mid and the highs. Let's go ahead and click that balance check so we can see this is now going to give us tips on what we might want to consider doing. These aren't hard and fast rules, so don't just follow these blindly, but it's telling us that the level of the mids looks good in comparison to the reference group, and the level of the highs looks good in comparison to the reference group. And it's telling us that the lows seem like they're a little low. So we could use a bit more bottom end. And listening to this, let's actually make our own decision, right? So let's go ahead and just have a critical listen to the actual song. Good. Yeah, I actually agree with that. I think that the low end is a little bit light. So this is where I begin to go in and make some EQ changes. So let's go into our mastering collection here. And let's go ahead and grab the Dangerous BAX EQ. This is a mastering EQ, and it's an emulation of a piece of hardware by Dangerous, one that happens to be really nice. So I'm going to take this EQ and I'm going to place it right before the mastering limiter. I don't want this to be affecting anything else. So I've done things previously in the chain with respect to thresholds and gain reduction, primarily this Pro-C2, Pro-MB, and also the K-Clip, that I don't want to have to go back and change all those settings. So I'm not going to make my changes with this EQ at the beginning of the chain. I'm going to solely make some adjustments just before the mastering limiter. So let's go ahead and take our low shelf. We'll take that up to 98, and we'll pop this up. I like how this EQ actually works, and it's got clicked gradients where you're not having to decide whether this or everything in between sounds better. You're just listening to these discrete positions, which I find is very useful. Let's go ahead and just push the low shelf up a little bit. So balance check is now telling us that everything looks good. If we turn that off, we can take a look at the spectrum. Awesome. Correlation is looking good. Everything here is looking like it's in alignment with our reference group. Another thing I want to show you is mono check. So mono check, like balance check, gives you tips and information on the width and the correlation of these different three bands. So let's turn that on and play it. Awesome. So it's telling us that the width of the lows looks good and the overall correlation looks good. One final thing that I might want to play with in this master is adding a little bit of extra width push to the top end. And there's a couple ways that I will experiment with that. So we've taken this sides filter here and we've removed some of the extreme low energy from the mix. When you remove energy from something, you can transfer it and add that energy back somewhere else. So in this case, what I can do is I'm going to add a shelving filter up in the highs, and I'm going to add a little bit to the sides only. And this will give a little bit of extra width to the master. And we don't want to go crazy here, maybe just a dB, like this. Another thing that I'll do that is interesting in the black box is because we've split things between the mid and the side signal, the sides of the signal, because they are being high passed with the Pro-Q3, are not being saturated as much. And also over here, we have an air. So this is going to engage a high shelf up above 10K and add a little bit of a boost to that as well. So that's something we can experiment with. So now that we've made all these adjustments, let's go ahead and clear everything and take one final analysis pass at this using our two plugins. You can see our integrated LUFS calculation has gone up a little bit, likely from some of these final tweaks we've been doing. So there's room to be able to back off the mastering limiter just a touch. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll flip back over to short term and make the adjustment. Right on. Now our integrated loudness is sitting very, very close to that of the combined reference group, and I'm feeling good about everything we did in the mastering session. One final note that I'll make is in this section, for the purposes of this tutorial, I've looped up the drop. Obviously, if I'm mastering the song, I'm going to be listening to the entire song start to finish. But for the purposes of our tutorial today, I just focused in on the drop. So there you have it, folks. Deep dive complete. That is how I'm using these plugins to be able to nail my levels, loudness, and spectral balance in my own mastering workflow. As you can see, they are packed with useful features that are going to help you out a lot to make better decisions. And they also are doing something new. And that's really important to me if I'm considering investing in new tools and adding to my plugin stack. They need to be offering something that previous tools I've been using haven't offered yet. So if you guys want to pick these up or just check out the demos, links are below in the video description. Big ups to Sonible for hopping on board as a sponsor of this video and helping us continue to generate new content for the YouTube channel. Please smack that like button and give us a thumbs up if you guys liked this video. And if you haven't already, hop on board as a subscriber and enable all of the notifications so you get the heads up on new videos when we post them. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you real soon. Peace.